Ladies and gentlemen, the fantasy season is done and dusted, but did you think we were done and dusted? We got one more week of Fourth and Frames for you guys, where tonight we talk about our best and worst calls of 2024, our favorite draft strategies, and we're going to bring it back to the way back. We are going to have a 2024 redraft with my boys, Nate Markham and Drew Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get it popping.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
And for everybody that's locking in with us, welcome again to Fourth and Frames, the last Fourth and Frames until March 2025. Going to take a little bit of a break after tonight, but you know what? We needed to come together one last time with these two marvelous gentlemen over with our crew and our gang over at Fantasy and Frames. And don't forget, speaking of, don't forget to like and subscribe and review on our YouTube channel. Anytime a new podcast or short drops from Fantasy and Frames, and starting now, today, January 1st, you can search for any of our podcasts here at Fantasy and Frames by name whenever you listen to podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. For us, for this show, just make sure to subscribe to the Fourth and Frames podcast. Guys, my words are everywhere, but you know what? The words are not everywhere tonight. Matter of fact, they're all in one place at fantasyandframes.com, where we try to give you the latest weekly IDP, Dynasty rankings, articles, takes, news and notes. Coming up soon, some Dynasty stuff, some NFL draft stuff, all sort of good stuff on the website, fellas. As always, I just got to ask y'all one last time for the 2024 season, and we'll start with you, Drew Scott. Hotel Drew is in the building, and how the heck are you, man?
I'm sad. Man. This is the last time we're going to do this until like mid-March, whenever we have NFL free agency news to react to for the 2025 fantasy football season. So it means I won't get to talk fantasy football with you guys, at least on here. We'll still talk, but we won't get to sit down and do this for over 2 months, man. So I'm a little sad.
Yeah, I hear you. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, sad, but a good sad, because as the only way to feel pain or sadness is to have something that you've loved so much. And doing this for 18 weeks or 19 weeks, whatever this is brought enough joy that you have the right to be sad, Drew. But there should be happiness. Well, I'm sad about some of my busts. I'm happy about most of my good picks. I mean, we'll get to those, of course, but all in all, this is nice, relaxing. I don't have to have any real stats to back anything up. I can't be wrong. I can be right, I guess. But yeah, we'll be perfect tonight until we do the redraft, and then I'm sure someone will tell us how wrong we are.
We'll mess that up somehow, even though we
will always mess that up. But fellas, I'm with y'all, man. It's been a fun ride as always. Our second season with me and Drew in the saddle here at Fourth and Frames. Nate joining back with us this season. Just been a heck of a ride, a heck of a time with you guys all season long. Yes. Upset that we're going to take a little break, but you know what? Sometimes a little recharge is needed so we can come back better than ever for that 2025 season when that free agency kicks off. So, fellas, normally we would get into news and notes right about now. I mean, we normally talk about who's hurt, who do we think is going to play, who we think is an adequate replacement. But you know what? We don't have that to worry about this week, so let's talk real ball. Like, the playoffs are around the corner. I've got the brackets pulled up right now. The Kansas City Chiefs, Nate Markham's Kansas City Chiefs are the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Buffalo Bills are the 2 seed. The Baltimore Ravens, the 3 seed. The Texans, the 4 seed. The LA Chargers, first year under Jim Harbaugh, is the 5 seed. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the 6 seed. And Sean Payton's Denver Broncos are the 7th seed. And in the NFC, You have the Detroit Lions as the 1 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles is the 2 seed, the Buccaneers is the 3 seed, Drew's LA Rams is the 4 seed, the Minnesota Vikings at 14-3, unbelievable, as the 5 seed. The Washington Commanders at 12-5 as the 6 seed. And then the Green Bay Packers as the 7 seed. Guys, before we start getting into predictions, do we notice whose team is not in the playoffs this year? Just shot in the
I'm
dark.
glad that you brought it up because I was going to, but now I don't have to because I was going to say a little something like, "Hey Nate, you remember the first couple weeks of the season whenever we had to hear
you remember when the Saints were putting up
powered the Saints offense was and that they were going to go into So
I should have put that as my worst take for the season.
I was going to play the fun game of raise your hand if your team's in the playoffs, but we don't have to do that now. So
right. I did it for us. So with that said, fellas, let's go around the frames and let's go ahead and just ask you what your Super Bowl predictions are going to be and who is your winner. And let's start with you, Nate.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, it's not just the homer in me. It's really hard to pick against Kansas City and as far as the AFC goes. But if there was I don't know. I don't want to ever hedge a bet because I think that Buffalo has a very, very good chance just as much as anybody, honestly. But, man, they have to go against the Ravens in that second round, most likely, at least in the divisional. But I'm going to go KC, and it's – I mean, both 1 seeds. Detroit is just filthy. They showed that in Week 17 that they weren't taking their – I think I was talking about that before, that they feel that I don't know if they feel that they don't deserve to be there, but I think they get the feeling that people think they don't still deserve to be there. And Dan Campbell has proven that. And hopefully the defense holds up. And I'm sure you didn't really need a whole 20-minute reasoning for why. I think you just were asking 2 team names and I went on, but I'm going to say it's a Kansas City, Detroit Super Bowl.
And who wins?
I say you got to pick your winner.
I'm gonna go with the Chiefs. I'm not gonna, I guess curse anything on the air, but I still do believe that. I'm not saying it just because, me being a Chiefs fan, but other teams are forced into playing a perfect game against them to win, and that's tough to do in most situations.
Drew, what do you got, man?
Yeah, so Nate, you're safe from the whole people can't say that you're just making that pick because you're a homer. I mean, it's the fucking Chiefs. Anybody is fair to say the Chiefs are going to make it. However, I did not pick them to make it this year. Sure. The AFC is tough, man, and I like the Chiefs, but I also like the Ravens quite a bit as well. And I have Lamar getting over the hump this year. I think that he's playing, even though there's apparently a world where he doesn't win MVP this year, I think he's playing the best football of his career, and he's already won 2 MVPs. So I don't know how he doesn't win it this year, but that's a whole other debate. And I love Josh Allen. I think he's very deserving as well, but I think it should be Lamar. But that was, you mentioned it, the Ravens and Bills game. Whenever I was sitting there doing my bracket and I got to that game, it took me longer to pick that game than it did the winner of the Super Bowl. That was the hardest game for me to pick between. And so, but I ended up going with the Ravens. And man, if they can beat Buffalo and Kansas City on the way to the Super Bowl, then once they eventually run into the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, I think that that's just kind of something that they're going to take care of. And I'm gonna say that the Ravens go the whole way and they win the whole shebang this year. But Philly, I think Philly's gonna be tough, man. Their whole team is just so well rounded. I don't think that anybody is going to be able to go to Philadelphia and beat them. And then once they go to Detroit, if that is what ends up happening, I actually have Detroit getting upset, and so Philadelphia gets to play the NFC Championship at home. And that is also something else that works out in their favor. If they get to play the entire trip, if they get home field advantage the whole way to the Super Bowl, then I think they definitely get there. And so I got the Ravens and Eagles, and then I've got the Ravens winning it.
Real quick question is, as far as the Eagles go, a lot of conversation about the Chiefs having so much time off. Does the same thing concern you with Jalen Hurts having so much time off? And everyone, do you think that's just one component to worry about, and the rest of the team can support Jalen Hurts at least en route to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I think if they were a more higher volume passing offense, I'd be a little bit more concerned, but they can win games with him just, throwing the ball 15, 20 times, 25 times, and letting him do it with his legs a little bit to help him get comfortable as well. So if they were more dependent on the passing game to be able to win games, that might be more of a concern. But just with the way the Eagles offense is constructed, I think that they'll be able to manage that until Hurts does get comfortable.
Like both of those picks. And guys, I'm kind of going to take a little bit of a mismatch of both of you guys because I looked at the bracket and I love the way Lamar's playing. I love the way that Baltimore team is built. I love Baltimore to come out of that AFC. And I just think Detroit offensively is one of the better offensive teams that we've seen in this league over the past 5 years. I mean, defensive issues aside, they've just been unbelievable. But if they get into a shootout with anybody, I have a hard time seeing anybody being able to run with them. And Detroit can do it at any given time. I mean, we've seen Jahmyr Gibbs have a 1,400-yard year this year. We've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown have another monster season. We've seen Jameson Williams. We'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah. We've seen him emerge a little bit as well. I mean, it's just a team that has a lot of really good things going for it. David Montgomery's going to be back as well. Mm-hmm. And so, this is just a team that is well equipped to win against just about anybody in terms of offense. They're going to be a hard team to stop. So between those teams, though, I'm kind of with Drew. I mean, I still think Detroit has a little bit of purifying fire that they need to go through before they get over the hump. I'm going to go ahead and take Baltimore and let Lamar get over the hump this year and let him get that ring, man.
I hope so. God, I hope so. I love Lamar. I want to root for Detroit. I love Dan Campbell. He is one of the easiest coaches that there's ever been to root for. I'm just worried that Goff's going to turn it back into a pumpkin at some point in the playoffs. And with how beat up the defense is, I mean, the defense looked great against Minnesota for how beat up they are. I don't know how much that was. Yeah, I'm sure it was a mix, of Detroit playing well and Sam Darnold looking like he was back with the Jets, seeing ghost again at some points, especially in the red zone. Yeah. And man, he was throwing the ball high. That was kind of the thing that let me know, he's a little rattled whenever he was selling so many throws. But I'm kind of worried the same might end up happening to Goff. So as much as I want to root for Detroit, that part makes it a little tough because if the offense has an off game against a good team in the playoffs, I don't know if the defense is going to be able to keep them in it. But I say that after they looked really impressive against Minnesota, so who knows?
I will say this, though, Rhett, and maybe you can agree. I think this season has shaped up to potentially give us at least maybe a half dozen different Super Bowl pairings that would be must-watch TV as far as, Buffalo, Philly, Buffalo, Detroit, Baltimore, the teams we just mentioned. Obviously KC is must watch, but at the same time, I'm sure people are sick of seeing them. So I understand that side of it, but how fun would it be to watch a Washington Commanders team go in and make it, far enough to with Jaden Daniels, et cetera. I don't think that's going to happen, but and that's not falling short of, of course. Yeah. How great would it be Denver and Washington to see, Bo Nix versus Jaden Daniels, but I don't know. I just feel like there's more parity in the league this year, even though. Yeah, Susie. Hey,
I was leaving that up there too. You saw it.
I appreciate that.
I just wanted to make sure you saw it.
I did. And then luckily, you didn't hear us say the Rams were gonna do anything. That's weird. Isn't that weird how that happens?
I didn't want to bring it up, but I had them beating Minnesota and then upsetting Detroit. So and that absolutely is partial homerism. I mean, you guys are lucky I didn't have them going all the way to the Super Bowl. So, but I mean, honestly, man, outside of the Steelers, I would probably say the Broncos.
I don't think I want to see the Packers necessarily. The Packers don't inspire anything on either side of the football right now for me. It feels like they've limped their way the last couple of weeks, with Jordan Love looks just off. I don't know, I mean, there's a number of situations, but it's the Packers and there's a good following but it's a Super Bowl. You don't need to have teams that travel well to make it a good game.
Yeah. Outside of those couple teams, honestly, it wouldn't shock me to see any team make a run in the playoffs, though. It really does feel extremely wide open.
You know what would just be so fun for me, though?
Go Rams.
And it is, go Saints, what? No, and I'm going to say this, and this is how I'm trying to be as unbiased of a journalist as I possibly can be right now. there would be something magical about someone being as down and out as Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold were. For them to make a run to the Super Bowl, that would just be
awesome.
so much fun for those guys. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, that's it, guys. So we're all on the record.
2 Ravens and a Chief.
2 Ravens and a Chief, all AFC. So
all AFC.
So, guys, before we get into our best and worst of 2024, let's talk about Dynasty decks one last time. So, those fantasy championships may have just wrapped up, but what better way, if you haven't done it yet, to capture your victory and that immortality than by getting your very own Dynasty Decks championship plaque? So, at Dynasty Decks or the dynastydex.com, you can get fully customizable championship plaques for any fantasy football league, whether it's an offensive league, an IDP league. Let's say you have a head coach only league, you can get one of those as well. Use the promo code FRAMES and receive $5 off of the purchase price, which is extremely affordable compared to other market prices at other websites. So y'all go ahead and get that championship plaque over at the dynastydex.com today.
I do want to give a special shout out real quick, not to cut anybody off, but Mr. Chris Battistell is the champion of the first annual, if you will, Fourth and Frames listener league. I think he deserves his accolades, and we can take somewhat pride. You know, it was a host. He's still a host in our
former host. Yeah,
I'll never use the word former because he's always welcome to
to
occupy the spot right down there.
Yeah, we can move me a little to the left or right, and yeah, absolutely.
Move me down. You guys take top billing, but. Yeah, congratulations, Chris Battistell. And Drew, you have, if you get a Dynasty deck, or I guess for our Fourth and Frames Dynasty League, you could get a Dynasty deck and still include all of your draft picks on that board with enough space because you have no more draft picks. Drew pulled the savviest of savvy moves, I will say, for anybody listening that's not familiar. It was fantastic to watch. I was actually mortified that I didn't make a smarter move. He made a couple moves, had some players, and should have honestly probably won that league, but it was that's what I love about Dynasty leagues, guys, is you have the options with no trade deadline, by the way, too, which is another.
That was fun. That's the first Dynasty league I've had that has no trade deadline. That was fun. I can't lie.
It was. I didn't even see it happen. Like for hours.
I made the trades while you guys were doing the Sunday morning show. And so you were preoccupied and busy.
Son of a bitch. I was like, holy hell. But yeah, so great seasons all around, everybody.
Yeah,
it was.
Except for me, but it's fine. But you know what, guys? Despite that fact, let's go ahead and let's start talking about our best and worst of 2024. Let's start off with our best calls of 2024. And we're looking at this can be a player take, a team take, a draft strategy, anything that you loved saying in 2024. This is your chance to take your victory lap, your best of the best, receive your flowers, your accolades, your gold medals, whatever you want to do. This is your moment. So, Nate, I'm going to lead it off with you because this is one that you stood on that high horse. You banged the drum. You told us, and you told us, and you told us. And some of us may have looked at you crazy. Maybe some of our listeners thought you might have been a little bit unwell about it. But you know what? You stood by it, and you know what? It came through. So go ahead and take your victory lap when in the preseason you said Jameson Williams would finish as a top 36 wide receiver. And baby, it is written, it was said, it has come to pass. Brag on yourself, boy.
Well, everything that I needed to happen as far as what my reasoning was, going back, pulling data, looking at receivers that playing on even just a top 10 offense as far as passing yards and overall scoring. Any wide receiver that had received 90 plus targets, an ADOT of over 10 has finished inside the top 28 wide receiver numbers. And so looking at Jameson Williams, we assume the ADOT probably wasn't going to stay what we had seen over the previous couple of years, 15. That's a little outlandish, but he was he was right there. It was 11.2. The targets were 91, so one more than the 90 that I needed, and he was on the attached to the Detroit offense. And mind you, that was in 15 games, not in the 17 that we really would have liked to have. And if you had him and you listened and you had enough Jameson Williams, he carried many a teams through the playoffs as well. And it was nice to see it. And in all formats too. That's the nice thing. He wasn't just, PPR driven, because 91 targets isn't going to relevate, completely with that. But if you look at standard scoring, he was the wide receiver, like 14 on a per game basis, but in overall points he was a wide receiver 13 in standard. If you look at full point PPR, and this is total points, not points per game either. So, I mean, here's a 15 game season. He was a wide receiver 22, and in half point PPR, he ended up, and I should have this written down, but of course I didn't. He was a wide receiver 19. So Jameson Williams, yes, he was many of my wide receiver 3 on way, way too many teams to put all your eggs in one basket. But he hatched into a couple fantasy championships and an overall, honestly, a very successful season.
And you said a wide receiver 3. Based off of what you told us, Jameson Williams was a full-blown wide receiver 2.
Absolutely.
Over the course of the season. So bonus points and bonus kudos for you, my man. So Nate Markham, Jameson Williams as a top 36 wide receiver. Take a bow. It's now Drew Scott's turn. Drew, the My Guy show was the best of times and the worst of times for you. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But you know what? Right now, I want you to go ahead and talk about the best of times, because you made 2 calls on that My Guys show and the AFC preview, AFC West preview, that really ended up being pretty damn good. So go ahead and tell us about them.
Yeah, whenever our My Guys episode rolled around, the wide receiver I was going to go with was a pretty easy call at that point, because I was drafting him all over the place. T. Higgins was the wide receiver 27 in ADP at the time of our recording of that show. And I had him at wide receiver 20, and I still ended up being entirely too low. Higgins was healthy, Burrow was healthy, and the last 2 seasons that had been the case, Higgins had been the wide receiver 13 and the wide receiver 12. So the price tag just never really made sense to me. And now he did miss the first couple games of the year. He also had another stretch from weeks 8 to 10 where he missed games. So you had to survive time without him. It wasn't a season without pain. But if you did survive, you ended up with the wide receiver 3 in points per game, which it's wild to me that the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 3 in points per game were on the same team. But the cherry on top of this with the T. Higgins call was that if you did survive, if you made it through, and if you were playing in your fantasy championship with T. Higgins, he gifted you with a 40 burger that he dropped in the championship weekend that won people so many titles. So that really was just kind of like the bow put on the call at the end that he delivered like that in championship weekends. Now he's a free agent to be. So this offseason is going to be really interesting to see where he ends up.
Get that man paid.
Yeah, he deserves it. He deserves it. I would like to see him stay in Cincinnati, honestly. I love what him and Jamar Chase do in that offense, and the targets are so consolidated between the two. Like, even if he is technically a wide receiver 2, he has clearly shown that he can be a wide receiver 1 for fantasy regardless. But if he was to leave Cincinnati, I want to see him go to the Chargers. I want to see him be wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert. And I know that wouldn't jive with something with a player you're about to talk about, Rhett.
Shots fired.
I want to make sure that he stays attached to an elite quarterback, and Justin Herbert is absolutely that. And they even with McConkey, they still have a need at receiver. So I would love to see him go over there if he does leave the Bengals. But T. Higgins, my guy, you were the only person that saved that episode from being an absolute nightmare for me. So thank you very much. I'm forever in your debt.
And I love the T. Higgins free agent talk, and I can't wait to come back whenever we come back on mid-March with that free agency show. We're going to talk about where T. Higgins is, because for me, I was talking with some friends the other day, and the best scenario in my mind, and it's not even necessarily a great scenario because they've got some rebuilding to do, but there's just something that started twisting in my head that, let's just say the New England Patriots, with all this cap space, sign T. Higgins,
Makes a lot of sense.
draft Ted McMillan, and then move Pop Douglas into the slot. All of a sudden, that wide receiver room is rebuilt, and like we're good to go right there. So that'd be a pretty good scenario as well for both of those guys and for that offense overall. But I mean, we'll talk about that in a couple months. But fantastic segue and a great way to kind of bury my guy that I'm going to talk about right now, Drew, because man, I first started off, and it deserves some honorable mention. I was going to give Bryce Young some flowers because one of my takes was that Bryce Young isn't dead. And for a while there, we were getting ready to call time of death on him until that 8-game stretch where he ended up well above expectation and has a lot of hope in next year. But then I thought about it. I'm like, there's something better here. And that better for me was Ladd McConkey, because I was there preseason, NFL draft season, doing videos on Mike Cash of FFRPG and Football Guys, where we did a college tape breakdown of Ladd McConkey. And when I watched this guy run routes, I fell in love. I fell in love with the player that he was. And I said, this guy is going to be a player in the league. Size didn't matter to me at that point. He ended up getting drafted to the San Diego Chargers, landing with Justin Herbert. Rises up draft boards, ends up going off as the wide receiver 44 heading into the season. Ends the season in PPR formats as the wide receiver 12.
Crazy.
It is an unbelievable rise. He ended up with 82 receptions, 1,149 yards, 7 touchdowns, only 112 targets, and really goes crazy and hits his stride over the last 7 games. 58 targets, 45 receptions, 657 yards, which is a 14.6 average, and had 3 touchdowns at the end. So the touchdowns aren't quite at that elite level yet, but if you get 7 in a year, you're still doing pretty good for yourself. What really blew my mind was his prorated stats. Had he played at that same pace over the past 7 games throughout the full year, it would have been 141 targets, 109 receptions, 1,596 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Those numbers would have had him 5th in the league in receptions, 2nd in receiving yards, and at 262 fantasy points per game. He would have ended up at the wide receiver 9 for the year, below CeeDee Lamb and right above JSN. So just it was really a good year for rookie wide receivers, because you had Malik Neighbors have a great season. Brian Thomas Jr. had a great season. Ladd McConkey has a great season. The guy that everybody was hyping up, by the way, that is also an alternate hot take that I should have rolled with, was that Marvin Harrison was not going to live up to that preseason hype. That also came to pass. So I'm just going to give myself 3 sets of flowers right here. It's fine. I'm hosting my rules, whatever, guys. Just deal with it, okay?
Just have a whole bouquet.
But heading into 2025, I don't see a situation where Ladd McConkey, barring someone signing in free agency, if he stays the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles, there's a very good chance that I have him as a top 7 or a top 8 receiver in redraft heading into 2025.
Top 7 or 8?
He finished 9 this year, bro. How is that crazy?
Because he was wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game.
He's looking at the trends, and the trend was that we heard Keith Fleming at one point, I think I'm gonna make up a number. I should know.
We could just insert week here.
Insert week, whatever. He mentioned how
he said it every week.
the Chargers were starting to become more pass heavy, and
it was nice
passing more on pass on first downs. I think a lot of that's contributed to the lack of the rushing game. I think that's the one area where you saw, both from when Dobbins went down and Gus Edwards' efficiency started really wavering.
That's a good point.
It was nice to see them trust in Herbert. And it makes me wonder, will that be the mindset going in? And if he's the only real mouth to feed, I can back up a very close number. I don't know if I go that high.
Let's put it to the test. So I'm gonna Jefferson, Chase, Amon-Ra,
CD,
Puka.
Okay, that's 5.
The two other rookies that finish ahead of him: Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr.
Okay, time out though. Time. Brian Thomas Jr. with a coaching change. That's it.
I'm just asking if you would take Ladd over him. That's all.
Right.
But
if that coaching change is Ben Johnson, then I'm even higher probably. But
we're at 5. We're at 5 before we even talk about the 2 rookies. Then you have Malik Neighbors, and then you have Brian Thomas Jr. I haven't mentioned Nico Collins yet. I haven't mentioned AJ Brown yet. I haven't mentioned JSN yet, who just broke out. Just hey, more power to you. More power to you, Rhett. I know you kind of just probably threw that number out there too. You know, I'm not going to hold you to. I'm not going to hold you to this. I'm not going to hold you to this in January.
All right. So look,
here's the name for you.
I think top 12 to top 15 would be probably where I think I'd probably have him around like wide receiver 15. And I was the lowest. I say all that to say that I'm kind of burying the lead here. I was the lowest on Ladd. Actually, our AFC West preview, I'm pretty sure I remembered saying toward the end of the show something along the lines of this might be one of my worst takes of this couldn't be one of my worst takes of this year, but I don't really know if Ladd is actually a guy because he was Ladd was a guy that looked really good to me on film. Like whenever you just watch him run routes, it's clear he can run routes. Like it's clear that he has talent, but his analytical profile was awful. Like as a sophomore, he got outproduced by A.D. Mitchell, who was a freshman at the time. Like you know, it didn't concern me that Brock Bowers was outperforming him because he was Brock Bowers, but I had concerns about his analytical profile, and I'm very much a blended person. Like I believe that analytics and film both have a piece whenever you're trying to evaluate a player. But typically, whenever there's a 50-50 guy like that, I tend to lean more toward the film side than the analytical side. And for whatever reason, I trusted the analytical side more with Ladd. And I ended up being wrong. I was too low on him on rookie drafts. I was too low on him for redraft. He could have been one of my bad calls. You know, so like I also have I have to try to be aware of my what's that called whenever you're holding on to a previous take? Take lock. Take lock. Yeah. I mean, I basically just said the whole word. I said half the word trying to figure out what the word was. But so I had to make sure not to have take lock with Ladd because I was not a big Ladd guy in draft season last year. And you were, Rhett. You were a huge Ladd guy, and you nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. So I don't blame you for being high on him. But whenever you say top 7, top 8 receiver, man, that jumps off the page. Like that's hot. That's spicy.
And look,
bio spicy. Like
so, Rhett, if you're in the 5th pick in the draft, and your first pick, you take Bijan if he's available at 5. Say it's a running back. It's your back. Are you comfortable with Ladd being your wide receiver 1 on your team? Because that's the decision you'll have to make.
Yeah, because he'll probably be going around 2, right? Like he'll probably be like a 2-3 turn type of guy next year.
Yeah, I look at him and Drake.
Assuming
London
they don't add like a T. Higgins or something like that.
Right. So if him and Drake London, that's the 2 names that I think of. I'm like, man, I worry about, like, I look at London with Penix and I see the potential continued escalation, and that offense should get, more comfortable around him. But like, I would feel more comfortable with London, but I think that Ladd would be the more shoot the moon type pick. And I don't know why I use those 2 by comparison.
What about Terry McLaurin in year 2 with Jaden Daniels?
I think the touchdowns are that's not too sticky for me. I don't know if I trust the touchdowns per se as much as I think the target volume that Ladd had and what we saw. Drake London, I think with Penix was pushing 40% target. I mean,
it hit 41% target share after week 18, whenever he had like 15 targets, whatever it was. Yeah, he had in the games with Penix at quarterback, London had a 41% target share.
Right. And that's unsustainable too, of course.
But. Absolutely, yeah. I bet those guys are going to be being very close to each other. But Rhett, it was a great call on your part, man. And
I love this game.
You were spot on. You were spot on. And one of the best parts about if you did listen to Rhett and you had Ladd on your team is in PPR leagues, the dude had almost 30 points in championship weekend. Like, so if you listened to Rhett, if you invested in Ladd, you probably ended up with some fantasy titles because of it. So kudos to you, man. You nailed it.
Yeah, like I said, Jay was just a fun guy to root for because it's just one of those guys you just watch him and not an analyst,
man. He's first not guy an analyst, last guy out.
He's really got it between the ears, He's just first guy in, last guy out. Use all your stereotypes here. So.
Yep. But that imagine that team if you did that. If you had Ladd, Jameson, and T. Higgins, that would be. I mean,
and that was plausible. Okay. That was
doable. That was
absolutely that was possible. Yeah.
In an auction format, it was possible to have those 3 guys for a combined 40
like $15.
bucks. Yeah. And you could have taken every top player at every other position, but you wouldn't have to. This has been an odd year that maybe we'll go into talk a little bit as far as some of our strategies, because I think they all revolve around these same notions that we've had.
Yeah. And before we move along to our bad calls, I do want to give, I forgot to mention earlier, just a quick victory lap on Brock Bowers. And we did our AFC West preview. He was my must player for that. If you guys remember during draft season, there was like 5 or 6 tight ends that we were all just sure we needed to draft one of those 5 or 6 guys. You know, they were all going to hit. I think only like 2 or 3 of them ended up actually hitting.
that was Red's do not draft was Laporta.
Yeah. It was. That's another great call, Red. That was the one guy because of his ADP that we were all pretty much out on. But at least my draft strategy was I want to try to get one of the first like 5 or 6 tight ends off the board. But if that plan failed, I said, hey, you should go get Brock Bowers. Trust the talent. Trust the fact that he has a clear path, even with Devontae Adams there at the time, to be a top 2 target in the offense. Obviously, Adams gets traded, and he ends up he was the tight end 10 in late July whenever we recorded that episode. He ended up finishing as tight end 2 in points per game in PPR. So I just want to throw that in there for Keith, that there was other people on Fantasy Frames that also loved Brock Bowers. We were with you, we were listening to you, and what a season for that guy. So yeah, go Brock.
Good stuff. So guys, I love that we got to toot our horns a little bit, but you know what? Nothing can bring you down to earth like a nice fat slice of humble pie, served warm, a little bit of ice cream, just delicious. So with that said, let's eat some humble pie, guys. Let's talk about our worst calls of 2024.
Yep.
Because we're going to talk about the same thing as above, just the sucky side of it, because transparency is just as important as us talking about how awesome we are. Because you know what? For every good take we've had some really, 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 really bad ones. So Nate,
yeah.
I'm going to let you lead off again right here and just tell us about one thing you said that just sticks out in your mind and you're like, could have done better with that one.
Great segue on the pie talk as far as this analogy, because there's a certain contingent of people that think apple pie is delicious with cheese on top of it. And I don't know those people.
Wow.
Have you not? You don't know that?
No.
Oh yeah.
What is wrong with people?
I don't know. Google it. It is amazing how many people think like cheddar cheese on apple pie is it's huge. I don't know how or why. What that is leading to is,
we need a new plate.
For me, I think the addition of cheese is disgusting. Well, the addition of a cheese head has made this running back somehow fantastic in 2024.
I was wondering where that was going.
Yeah, that's a long way. It was snowy here in St. Louis, up in Green Bay. And that's Josh Jacobs. He was a bust for me. I wasn't drafting him anywhere really at number 1 at his ADP, or 2, just I didn't believe a couple things. 1, I didn't like a Matt LaFleur offense that revolves around one running back. I really thought that he was going to be.
Yeah, it hadn't happened.
And somebody was going to, who that next person was, we didn't 100% know. Could have been Marshawn Lloyd, sure. Do we think it was going to be Emmanuel Wilson that was going to be second on that team in rushing attempts? Mind you, Josh Jacobs had 301 attempts, 200 roughly, 198 more than the next closest person. That I didn't expect.
Wow.
Yeah. 2, health. As I just said, 301 rushing attempts. Why wouldn't I think that was going to happen? Oh, I don't know, because he's only done that one other time in his career, and that was 2 years ago, leading into an injury-riddled 2023. So it was the combination of high-volume workload, injury, going to a team that he might not be as utilized, coming off of a 6-touchdown season, and rebounds with 16 total touchdowns, 15 on the ground, 43 targets, 36 receptions. It was just a season that, ultimately concluded as the RB5 on the year. His yards per attempt weren't necessarily like blowing you out of the water by comparison to the other top 10 guys, but it was, everything about Josh Jacobs, if you had him, supported where you took him. He didn't have like really any standout flaws in his season. That was the nice thing, is he had like 1 week where he was sub 10 fantasy points. And that was week 3 against Tennessee. Everything else was 20, I mean, the standard, what you would want out of your RB1. And I was wrong, and that's okay. Because you know what? I'm good enough, smart enough. Gosh darn it, people like me. Josh Jacobs.
It pays to be likable sometimes. The only thing that kept that from being one of my bad takes was just the fact that you were the one that was assigned to pick the bus for the Packers and not me. Because
Right.
if I would have been assigned that pick, I would have said the exact same player. And I'm pretty sure I agreed with you whenever we did the show. I was lower than consensus on Jacobs. He was considered a bust for me too. And clearly we were wrong. So you were not alone in that one.
That's the trifecta, by the way. All three of us, like Josh
and
Jacobs.
You know what's funny? The winner of the Fourth and Frames Listener League tried to talk sense into us. He's one of the few people I knew that was in on Josh Jacobs. Like, forget just Fourth and Frames, just in general, he was one of the few people I saw that was propping up Josh Jacobs, and he couldn't have been more right. And even though he wasn't actually drafting in our draft at the time Josh Jacobs would have been drafted, because he auto drafted like the first 8 rounds. The Fourth and Frames Listener League champion was the one guy that I knew that was in on Josh Jacobs. So maybe we should have listened to him.
We should have listened to him, but we didn't.
We didn't.
I remember when Jacobs got taken. It was middle of the 3rd round. QK, who was the slayer of all of us, basically.
Oh yeah, the runner-up
took him, and it was constant. Like, wow, great pick. I dropped bag. Had Isaiah Pacheco 2 picks before. Rhett took Cooper Kupp, and
that's bad.
Yeah. We don't need to rehash all of these, but that was.
Let's not dig up all the skeletons. Let's just leave some of them buried.
Exactly.
Some things are better left unsaid. But Drew, I want to get to you, buddy.
I don't want to.
This is. I want you to know, safe spaces, happy places. We're here for you. We're here to comfort you, hug you, guide you through your tough moments in life. But damn, dog, this was a really tough moment in life.
Yeah, this one hurt, man.
It stinks.
Yeah, I talked about T. Higgins. He was part of the My Guys episode, and he was the only one that saved me on the My Guys episode. Kyler Murray was one of those, but he ended up as the quarterback 12. Now, it wasn't what I hoped for Kyler Murray, but it wasn't bad enough of a season for me to put him in this category. But luckily, the other 2 guys I had as My Guys, they picked up the slack, and they were fucking terrible. And so now I can talk about them instead. So, Kyle Pitts, I don't know, man. This might have done it for me. This might have been the year. He might have finally beaten me into submission. Like I might finally not be a Kyle Pitts guy. Oh no. Okay. I'm back. Look,
the internet tried to save you.
Kyle Pitts is sabotaging my internet connection. Exactly. My fantasy season wasn't enough. Now he's sabotaging my internet. I don't get it, man. He had such a great rookie year, and then I could kind of like explain away the next couple of years because of the horrible quarterback play. And then he finally got the quarterback upgrade. He got what I thought was going to be an upgrade in play calling. The only thing that was holding him back from superstardom, the only things, they were all taken care of. This was the year, but it wasn't. Kirk Cousins was not the pre-injury Kirk Cousins. And at this point, I don't know what Kyle Pitts even is. Who's my tight end 4 last offseason, and he finished as the tight end 18 in points per game. 8 points per game. Yeah. Tight end 18, man. Just an awful call on my part. So many of my teams felt the pain. And then to double down on that, Jonathan Brooks, another my guy. I don't usually call players that got injured like a bust or a bad call because they got hurt, and it is what it is. But I think it's warranted in this scenario because there was never really a clear timeline on when he would be back. And Canales let us know that. I mean, early in the offseason, it was, we think he might miss the required 4 weeks and he might be back. But then later on, it was, no, there's no timeline. And I was just in one ear out the other, He's going to be back in 4 or 5 weeks. And then, by week like 7 or 8, he'll be acclimated to the offense and he'll be the workhorse because Dave Canales He uses workhorse running backs. You saw it with Rashad White in Tampa. This Jonathan Brooks is going to be the guy. Right process, wrong player. Because Chuba Hubbard ended up being the running back 13 in points per game. But luckily for me personally, I had Chuba on a lot of teams where I had Brooks. But for me, it was really just a lesson of if a player is dealing with an injury from the previous year and he doesn't have a clear timeline or he's not ready for training camp and there's not that clear, like, yeah, he's back. Because like with T. Higgins, that was the thing with Higgins was like it was clear he was fully healthy. There weren't injury concerns. There was no reason to push his ADP so far down from what his fantasy finishes were in years prior when he was healthy. And with Jonathan Brooks, he's already a rookie, so that's unknown in itself. And then he's a rookie dealing with injury. And then he's a rookie dealing with injury that isn't participating in camp. There were so many signs. There were so many red flags that I just chose to ignore. Like, they don't exist to me. I love Jonathan Brooks so much. I can't see the bad. I can only see the good. And that was a mistake on my part. It was a bad call. I should have taken that into account. But, yeah, and the even worse part is once he did finally get on the field, it wasn't until week 12, but then he re-injured himself in week 14. And now I don't even know when we're going to get to see Brooks again. And so I'm just going to I guess I'm just going to turn on his Texas tape that I loved watching so much and just watch that and cry because I don't know what else to do anymore. So Kyle Pitts, Jonathan Brooks, my guys this offseason, thank you for nothing.
Thank you for nothing. But you know what I do want to do right now? I want to play a little game called Which Unexpected Tight Ends Were Better Than Kyle Pitts this season?
Oh, boy.
All right. Raise your hand if you had Jonnu Smith outperforming Kyle Pitts this season.
You know the funny part about that, too? You remember how much we all killed Arthur Smith for utilizing Jonnu Smith over Kyle Pitts 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Arthur was right all along, and we killed him for it.
He was a genius all along.
I owe him an apology at least for that. He's still a fucking moron for using Algier as much as he did over Bijan. That is clear. That is now clear as day. If it wasn't clear as day already after this season and how incredible Bijan looked, that is clear as day. But apparently we owe him an apology for John.
Yeah, we're not done.
No, go ahead.
Dead as a doornail, Zach Ertz, better than Kyle Pitts. Pat Freiermuth, who felt like he did nothing all year, better than Kyle Pitts.
Tucker
Kraft,
dead.
Tucker Kraft, who had 2 good weeks, better than Kyle Pitts.
2 good weeks. Oh my God.
David Njoku, he of 5.2 yards per target.
That one doesn't surprise me. Njoku's
5.2 yards per target and 7.9 yards per reception, and 505 receiving yards this season.
But he's on level 100 on the dog factor, so that one doesn't surprise me. And
I expected him to be higher. I didn't expect him to have such a bad season and still outproduce Kyle Pitts. Had you said at the beginning of the season, these are the numbers for David Njoku, at that point I would have said, oh yeah, Kyle Pitts is outperforming those numbers for sure. I would have been wrong.
Hunter Henry, better than Kyle Pitts. Mike Gesicki, better than Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, that pisses me off.
And now, the coup de grace, K. Dotton.
Son of a bitch. Are you
better
kidding
than Kyle
me?
Pitts.
It wasn't enough for him to be better than Jelani Woods. Now he's better than Kyle Pitts, too. Oh, my God. Please nobody let Chris Battistel hear that. I'll never hear the end of it.
K. Dotton, that was definitely one of my targets, if you will. And unfortunately, he had, what did he have? Probably 2 really.
He had a whopping
24.
He had a whopping 24 points combined from weeks 12 to the end of the season. He had a whopping 24 points combined, but he had a nice stretch there after Godwin got hurt, though.
Yeah.
Which was more than Kyle Pitts did all year. So,
but you know what, guys? It's okay because both of you guys had perfectly reasonable takes. Josh Jacobs being a bust was plausible. Jonathan Brooks having a good rookie year was plausible. Kyle Pitts coming back from the dead was plausible. Guys, those might have been bad takes. None of you went on the ledge of talking about a player being number 1 at their position and them falling flat on their face. But guess who did do that, guys? Guess who did that? It was me.
Oh.
It was me talking about Breece Hall being the RB1 overall in 2024. And guess what, guys? Was Breece Hall the RB1 overall? Just quick survey. Let's go around the frames. Nate, was Breece Hall the RB1 overall this season?
On the season, was he? Did he have 1 week as the RB1?
I don't even know. Drew, was Breece Hall the RB1 overall for the season?
I was trying to find his ranking. Maybe it started with a 1. Yeah, so his finish did start with a 1. It wasn't the
Yes.
RB1, but it did have a 1 in it.
Yes.
Running back 18 in PPR points per game. So
yeah,
it had a 1 in it.
RB 17 in overall points per game. So you know what, guys? If you look at it in a nutshell and you see any running back on a given basis, on a yearly basis, you'd see 1,359 scrimmage yards, 57 receptions, nearly 500 receiving yards. You're thinking to yourself, that's a pretty good year, right? You're like, good for that guy. Like, he was solid all year long. And for most backs, running back 17 is a very nice place to end your season. I mean, you're a solid running back too. You could be a lot worse. The problem was that I just expected so much more out of that guy. And whenever he only hit the end zone for all of his receiving volume 5 times and none of them through the air, we saw the problems coming along. And on a per game basis, he wasn't very good. He averaged 13 carries at 53 yards per game, 4.2 yards per carry. He didn't have a run over 20 yards after week 6. His season-long run was a whopping 42 yards. All this from a man we deemed as one of the elite game-breaking running backs in the NFL. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, but I don't see those as the numbers of a game breaker.
No,
it's tragic. He was seen as so explosive, but heading into 2025, we have to adjust our feelings on Breece Hall and acknowledge him as a volume-based guy. And with a coaching change on the horizon and a coach who is not going to have brought Breece Hall in, and Braylon Allen behind him, and Isaiah Davis also behind him, there's a lot of uncertainty for the boy named Breece Hall in 2025. And guys, I'm just going to go ahead and say it in this very somber, sarcastic, upset tone. I hate everything, and I hate Breece Hall, and I mean that from the bottom of my soul.
I hate Breece Hall. I mean, I didn't have him as running back 1 overall, but I still had him as running back 3. I was drafting him in the first round. I was right there with. I don't know anybody that didn't have Breece Hall at least in their top 5 running backs.
Yeah.
He
supported the one thing that we wanted. He was third amongst running backs and targets. He had 76 of them. So I mean, that's the positive if there's going to be something going into next year.
Yeah. So
Nate found the flower in the pile of shit. That was good.
We love it.
Yeah.
Because with every pile, there's fertilizer, ladies and gentlemen. And Nate Markham had just found the fertilizer. But before we get into our redraft, guys, let's quickly talk about our favorite draft strategies of 2024. Nate, you mentioned it earlier. Had you hit T. Higgins, Ladd McConkey, and Jameson Williams, you would have absolutely nailed your strategy. Quickly talk us through it, buddy.
Yeah, it was the middle round hoarding of the wide receivers. I loved him this year. I loved so much of the upside that the guys you just talked about. We threw in Terry McLaurin was another name that I was really high on. So I mean, you're talking T. Higgins was the wide receiver 28. McLaurin was the wide receiver 30. You threw in someone like JSN, who we were high on at 41, and then
imagine if Rashee Rice and Chris Godwin stayed healthy.
Right, exactly. I mean, I really do believe Godwin
those were
was
2 guys we were all really high on that were going in the middle rounds,
and they were just destroying it. So it really supported that, especially if you were at the end of the first round when you could take players like Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, who went drafted lasted so long. But it was definitely a running back good support league this year, and those middle wide receivers really. As long as you took the ones that we liked and you didn't take the,
as long as you
the garbage. Yeah, as long as you took the right ones. Yep. Every strategy is perfect until you
the best strategy is truly just draft the good players.
That's exactly right. Yep.
That is it. So, Drew, go ahead and tell us about your favorite draft strategy that worked out for you in 2024.
It's an every year thing with me, man. I've always been a late round quarterback guy in 1 quarterback leagues. I cannot help myself. There's never a time that I spent in the early portion of my draft just loading up at receiver and running back and punting the quarterback position that I don't end up loving my team at the end of it. Not to say that they always pan out, that they always win, but damn, do they look good on my team page after the draft is over whenever I punted quarterback and I just stacked up on running backs and receivers. Now, and don't get me wrong, if you invested in Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, like I highly doubt you were upset with your choice. But if you were able to draft Jaden Daniels as the quarterback 12 while he finishes the quarterback 4, or if you were able to draft Baker Mayfield as the quarterback 21, or basically undrafted, and he finishes the quarterback 5, and you were able to spend those second and third round picks that you spent on Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, if you could spend those on, a running back, a receiver, I don't want to say a tight end because the tight end's, drafting the board in the second would have been a mistake. But if you would have loaded up at running back and receiver in the second or third round and taken Jaden Daniels later, I think you would have been extremely happy as well. So it's a strategy that I have no doubt I'll go right back to next year. It just stinks that I won't be able to draft Jaden Daniels again while doing it, that was basically my strategy this year was late round quarterback. Hello, Jaden Daniels. And that won't be possible again because he's going to be one of the early quarterbacks next year. But despite that, I almost guarantee I will be going right back to it next year. I can't help myself, man. I love it.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's a reason late round quarterback has been around for years. It's a reason JJ Zacharisian has named his podcast that late round QB, his draft guide. Like that's his brand. I mean, there are people that are much smarter than all of us. I mean, that, stand by this. So you know what, Drew, you're in good company on that. Now, my favorite draft strategy and one that worked for me personally, let's take it to the Scott Fish Bowl, because when the scoring came out, everybody was all about return yards. Oh, return yards are going to change the game. Return yards. And in my mind, I was going, and let's be honest, full disclosure, maybe it was a little bit of laziness on my part and not wanting to do that research. But in my mind, I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to punt return yards and see what the waiver wire brings to me. And guess what, guys?
Do you know what you just did there? Do you understand what you just did there? I'm going to punt return yards.
Hey-oh.
That was a bar.
No.
Sorry.
But guess what, guys? It worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
It did.
My Scott Fish Bowl, outside of the very regrettable choice of Anthony Richardson in the first round, which pour one out, it could have gone a lot better. I could have had Jaden Daniels in that spot if I'd have went hot takey. But guys, I ended up with Jamar Chase in the second round, Jahmyr Gibbs in the third round, Devon Achane in the fourth round, George Kittle in the sixth round. I took Malik Neighbors. I took Chase Brown. The team was stacked, and Anthony Richardson derailed me. God.
What could have been if you would have just had a better first-round pick, man, because that's a squad. Good Lord.
I know. Now, and you never would have known when we were talking to return yards. Of course, before the injury, Rashid Shaheed was the lone person that made sense. Yeah. And that was forecastable, if you will. I have a trivia for you guys based off of this answer, Rhett. Name me the wide receivers in Scott Fish Bowl scoring that outproduced Dallas Cowboys kick returner Keontae Turpin.
Jamar Chase.
Kevontae Turpin. Sorry, I say Keontae. Okay, that's one.
Justin Jefferson.
Nope.
Oh.
So that's it?
Is it Chase?
There's one
Chase more. Is it?
That's it. No, there's two total. Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Kevontae Turpin was third in scoring. But this isn't to throw water on your punt return. It's to say it's
nobody was drafting Kevontae Turpin.
No one. You had to pay attention.
I don't even know how to say his name right. Like,
yeah, I said it wrong. I said Keontae. It's Kevontae Turpin. And yeah, but that's the thing with that. You have to try to forecast and you have to try to predict. And it was explosive plays. If you knew that, that's great. But you're right.
There was still so many teams, like, in new rules be damned, they were still just kicking it into the end zone. Like there was teams to where your returners weren't playable because they didn't care about the rules and they were just doing touchbacks anyway. And so it's like that was just a whole other thing you had to pay attention to. And I don't know if I got time for that. So,
but Rhett, you were spot on. It was a grasping at straws to try to pick out the right person, and it left great value on the board for you, and you took advantage of it. Stupid Rashid Shaheed getting hurt. I was going to be.
He was loving it. God,
he was killing it for me.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. I digress.
No, we're good. So, guys, that's a lot of fun. But you know what? let's go ahead and let's wrap this up the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about if we could do it all over again. If we could make this bird sing one last time. If the melodies could just be that much sweeter. If we could do it all over again, what would we do?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're here right now, fellas. We want to redraft.
Hey, yo. There's our faces. All right, there we go.
2024, just one more time. So let's go ahead and kick that off. Drew, you're going to maestro this draft. So go ahead and let us know. Looks like you have yourself in there as the first pick. So you know what? I'm going to give you the honors, buddy.
I make the rules.
You make the rules. We'll just play bomb. You are going to be the 101 today. So tell us, in a 2024 fantasy football redraft with the first overall pick, who would you take?
He was going in the back of the first round, early second round. He's the 101 for me. It was the year of the running back, so I have to kick it off with a running back. It would have been Saquon for me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no question that. I
mean, put a bunch of analysis behind these picks, but
345 carries for the season, 2,000 yards. I mean, what more can you ask for out of a player? Nate, I'll let you have the 1-2. I'm going to be the generous young Christian tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and let you have the second pick. Who are you taking at the 102?
I'm taking the player who outproduced the next highest player at that position by the most points, which is Jamar Chase. He, the wide receiver 1 on the season, had 339 total points. Next closest was Justin Jefferson at 266, about a 73-point difference. The difference in wide receiver 1 versus wide receiver 12 on the year, who was Ladd McConkey, was 140 points different versus the running back where Saquon outproduced Chase Brown by 100. So a little better edge at wide receiver there for Jamar Chase.
Yeah,
I like it.
Fair enough. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this 103. And Drew, you're going to thank me for this because I know we're going to go after I take this pick. But give me Jahmyr Gibbs as the 103. You can't argue with the production. You can't argue with the efficiency. 250 carries, 1,412 yards, 16 touchdowns, throw in 50 reception and 500 receiving yards, and another 4 touchdowns. So 20 total touchdowns for the season. I mean, what a player, what an offense, what a season. Jahmyr Gibbs at the 103.
Yeah, and he would have been my 103 too. But I am happy I ended up with the 104 because I get to just sing love songs about one of my favorite players in the league.
Love songs.
I love this man so much. He doesn't even understand how happy he makes me whenever I get to watch him play football every Sunday. It is literally like poetry of motion watching him run the football. And it's Bijan Robinson. I'll never quit him, never get tired of him. He would never do to me what Kyle Pitts has done to me. And for that, I will always love him. But yeah, what set these two apart was just if you had Gibbs, that end of season stretch after Montgomery went down, I mean, that was just you can't and Bijan was great too, but yeah, I'm with you. But how about that? 3 running backs in the first 4 picks. So Nate, are you gonna keep? Oh, you're keeping it rolling.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah, we're going from that sweet, harmonious Bijan to
blow the doors
death
off.
metal Derrick Henry. Who, I mean, running back 3, everything that everybody was worried about, just basically said, I don't care if I get 22 targets. I'm going to run for 1,900 yards. I'm going to score 19 touchdowns, and I'm going to be the running back 3 on the season. Every week, pretty much you knew what you're going to get.
Yep, love it.
So before I make this next pick, and this is going to change my math a little bit, are we considering this a super flex or a 1 QB format, Drew?
1 QB.
Okay, 1 QB format. All right, that definitely changes the math for me. You know what? We talked about Josh Jacobs and what deficiencies he had. I'm gonna go with take lock, baby. I'm not drafting Josh Jacobs right here just because I feel like being petty.
Fuck you, Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs, you're done.
You're dead.
So I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm gonna take the next wide receiver off the board. Give me Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, just another season in a PPR format. 115 catches, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. Blah, blah, blah. It's getting boring. Consistency isn't fun. You know what? Consistency on that level gets you rings. So give me Amon-Ra in that spot.
Yep. My next pick was between two receivers, and Amon-Ra was one of them. And now I can just take the other one, and it was Justin Jefferson. And it's funny. I still remember we did the AFC North or the NFC North. It's not my pick,
right?
It's Nate's pick.
Yep.
I thought.
Nope. I took Chase. You took Gibbs.
No. Hold on.
I went
4,
after
5, 6. Yeah.
Red went last, and then I went next.
Yeah, that's true. Nate, you're wrong.
Nate, I am the captain now.
What? I am the captain. I'm just
not paying attention. You think you get to one pick off? You take Henry, and then you just get a one pick break. You get to pick again. What kind of show is this?
I'm the champion of the Fantasy and Frames Dynasty League. I can do whatever I want.
I got the crown. I want to.
Yeah.
Sure. I remember whenever we were doing the NFC North preview, I called Justin Jefferson the must draft. Like, yeah, this is obvious, But I said, hey, it's unfortunate he has to deal with the downgrade of going from Kirk Cousins to Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, but he's still Justin Jefferson. Turns out Sam Darnold was actually an upgrade somehow compared to what Kirk Cousins would have been this year. And Jefferson is still incredible. It's him and Chase, 1A, 1B in terms of the most talented receivers in football. And so, yeah, it's him and Amon-Ra were up there next for me. So, Nate, now that it's actually your turn,
now I don't want to pick now. It's tainted a little bit because hindsight will help us make these picks. Hindsight also makes me not want to make this pick, but I want to give him.
Are you going to make things right?
No, I'm going to say, and he was one of my guys. He, despite the injury, he was the RB6 on the year. And if they just had an ounce of luck, Rhett's New Orleans Saints would have made the Super Bowl. And Alvin Kamara would have been just a beast. Alvin Kamara had such a fantastic season, and just unfortunately the injury. So I'm going to bank this redraft that health is in his favor, and Chris Olave doesn't get hurt, and the offense continues to go a little bit better.
Put 40 points a game up all year long?
Okay, 40 might be a stretch, but
Dennis Allen still has his job. What?
Okay, let's not get carried away.
Now we're getting really carried away.
Now it's crazy talk. Yeah, but no, I want to, and that's hard to say because Jonathan Taylor had a better season, Josh Jacobs had a better season, but
he was your guy.
He's my guy. Got to give him his props. So he's going in the first round. There you go.
Absolutely. All right, Rhett, you're up.
This is a tough spot right now. Because you got a couple of guys who have really solid seasons. I mean, Josh Jacobs, really good. Kyron Williams, really good. Devon Achane, also really good. So, you have 3 solid running backs right here that you can all kind of split hairs on. Jonathan Taylor, also really good. But you know what? There's one close to 300. There's one 300-point scorer left on the board for the year. And he had 1,300 carries. He had 15 touchdowns. Not 1,300 carries, 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. Guys, I'm going to make it right on Nate's behalf, and I'm going to take Josh Jacobs here in this pick because it feels bad. It feels dirty. None of us liked him, but you know what? He deserves his respect right now. So, Josh Jacobs, come on down. You're the next contestant.
All right. It's time to give the rookie some love. It is that time.
Yep.
And it's not the rookie that I was the most high on in the offseason. I see him set down here. I see you, Marv. I took you in the second round of my home redraft league, and that's probably part of what – not probably, that is absolutely part of the reason why I didn't make the playoffs for the first time in my home league. It's not him, though. It's the guy he's the, the new hotness whenever it comes to, he's probably not even hot. I don't even want to have to scroll for him here, so I'll just type his name in. Malik Neighbors, man, he's going to be a first-round pick in fantasy drafts next year, and I don't really care what the quarterback situation looks like because he's explosive as all get out. He's an elite target earner, and I have to think that the quarterback play has to be better than this past year. But, we're going off of what we know now, what we would have done in 2024, and it's so wild to think that a rookie receiver did indeed end up needing to be a first-round pick, but it was not Marvin Harrison Jr. So, Rhett, again, hat tip for you for that call. But Malik Neighbors, what a freaking year, man. So, with Neighbors and Jacobs off the board, that brings us back to you, Nate. What are you doing here?
Yeah, I'm gonna back it up with a little bit of the hindsight, and unfortunately, the season didn't end the way I wanted it to for him. But CeeDee Lamb just dominated in targets again. He was attached to a team that, health with Dak. Granted, again, like I said, with Alvin Kamara, if I knew exactly what was going to happen, no, I wouldn't want to draft my first round pick knowing he's not going to be available for the fantasy playoffs. That would suck, because then I would be dead with Kamara and him. But hindsight's 2020. In this case, hindsight's 25-15, we'll say. I'm a little far-sighted or nearsighted, whichever one that is that works out for this decision.
And CD was still awesome, man. Like even with what was it, like week 9? It looks like that got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So let me do something real quick. So that let's just do week 9 to week 17. Let's see where that comes out. Week 9 to week 17, even without him there, CD was still the wide receiver 16 in points per game. So like you would think that the drop off would be much worse whenever you got Cooper Rush at quarterback. And then it's still, even with dealing with the injuries, he still ended up as the wide receiver 8 in points per game. So like what could have been a really, really bad season for CD, because CD is CD, it wasn't as bad. So yeah, I love that. I love it. CeeDee Lamb's incredible, man. And it feels like he's like with Jefferson and Chase having such great years, and then the rookie receivers bursting onto the scene. It seems like CD might end up being a guy that could possibly be a value somehow going into next year. I don't know.
Yeah, because where I'm going next at the 112, I'm going rookie wide receiver too. This is a guy, another one of these guys that I was unreasonably high on heading into the draft process. I think I had him as a wide receiver too throughout that draft process. I believe our good friend Gator J was on the show and said, that's crazy. That's not going to happen. Guys, Brian Thomas Jr. was a wide receiver 4 with 87 catches for nearly 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. He had 16.7 fantasy points per game. He ended up with 284 points total for the season. And all this in a really, really bad situation. So, like, the sky's the limit for that guy. Let's take him at the end of the first round. And I know that's probably a little high compared to where he's probably going to go next year. But
I don't know, man. I don't know. I really think he could. I think this is where he ends up going in drafts next year. I think he will be like a 1-2 turn pick, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you made the right choice picking him here too. There's a couple running backs that I still have that I would consider, but if you're going to go receiver, I think Brian Thomas Jr. should be the next man up. And I like the call. And again, it was another guy that you were, and you're an LSU guy, so you had this guy on your radar much longer than I did. But yeah, rightfully so. Clearly, the dude is a dog, and he's only going to get better. So I like it. I'm going to make things right here.
Yep.
For me, because there's a running back that I have just never been a fan of, despite the fact that I have all the reason to be a fan of him because he plays on my favorite team, but I've just never been a believer. But Sean McVay does not care what I believe, and he just wants to give one man the ball all the time. And Kyron Williams has shown that he will get the job done. He might not be super explosive. He's not Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's going to get you the first downs. He's going to get the hard yards. He's going to hold on to the ball. He's going to pass block. He's got good hands. And he was the guy all year. Once again, I was convinced that Blake Corum was going to eat into his work. Blake Corum was pretty much non-existent. And Kyron Williams was once again a workhorse for a great offense. And I should have been in on him, and I was not. So it's time to make it right and take him off the board here.
Look at you.
Yep. And I wasn't sure which running back you were going to go with because there were 3 in my mind, and Kyron was third on that list of the 3, but it wasn't because of like I actually think he's the third best. It's because that's not as big a fan of him, even though he is from St. Louis and all. I just love Devon Achane.
Yeah,
and I think that again,
my guy.
Oh, okay.
That was the other guy I was choosing between. Yeah,
rightfully so. I mean, what a season! Obviously, we wish Tua hadn't had the injuries because with Tua, there's no doubt that I think Devon Achane could very easily. We've seen make it an entire season, being the focal point of an offense, He's much better with Tua than he is with any of the other, vagabonds.
His numbers with just Tua were incredible.
But 87 targets on a season is through 17 weeks is exactly what you would want out of your RB1, especially for an offense that should even be more explosive if they speed it up just a little bit. They've been slow. We talked about that so many times this year, just how slow they played. But so sorry to make you tilt there, Rhett. Which direction you gonna lean?
I mean, I'm just gonna ask you guys a quick hypothetical question.
Okay.
Before I make a full decision, is it too early for tight end?
I don't know if it is or not.
I don't think so.
Okay, give me Bowers, baby. Give me Bowers.
I like it.
Wide receiver numbers at the tight end position.
You said you wanted Kyle Pitts, right?
Yes. Kyle Pitts. Kyle Brock Bowers Pitts. Absolutely. Wide receiver numbers at a position where you weren't getting much of that this season. I mean, what more can you ask for? Clear-cut tight end one heading into next season. Probably going to be in that mid-second round conversation next year as well when it comes to redrafts. So, I mean, let's just go a little bit early. What's the saying we always like to say? Get your guys.
And honestly, I've already seen talk that people are talking about being comfortable taking him at the 1-2 turn. Some people out there would consider this late. So, I like it, man. I mean, and if Bowers could do what he did with the quarterback play he had to deal with this year, you have to hope and assume that Oakland fans. You have to hope and assume that Las Vegas will improve the quarterback position, and then you have another year Brock Bowers has his first year under his belt. He should only get better with how great of a talent he is. So I think you're going to have to draft him in the early second if you want him next year, and that's where you should have drafted him this year, but you didn't have to.
Look at Sexy Team 10 with Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers as far as if you were starting off a draft.
You know how bad you would have gotten scolded if you started your draft like this?
They would have been crucified. What do you got, Drew?
All right. So whenever there's a future Hall of Famer on the board that just got another 1,000-yard season under his belt, you got to take him. And so Big Mike Evans, Baker was incredible. Mike was also incredible once again. And I don't think he would have had the year he had if Chris Godwin got injured. But, the beautiful thing about doing this now is we have the whole year to know what happened. And knowing what I know now, Mike Evans would have been a smash pick right here at this point. And I am so incredibly happy for him that he got the 1,000-yard season. And if you are upset about the way that they forced that 1,000-yard season to him, I think it's time for you to grow up, because whenever you can tie Jerry Rice for anything, any record at all, if you can be in the same vein as Jerry Rice, you do whatever you need to do it. And Mike Evans only played 14 games this year or something like that. He missed games. He would have gotten it comfortably had he been healthy all year. So it's not like that they just fabricated this. So that's just, sorry. Little side rant that had nothing to do with this, but I was so fucking annoyed watching people complain about the fact that they forced him to 1,000 yards, and that that just blew my mind that there was people actually upset about that. So Mike Evans, I love you. You're incredible.
Yeah. So Nate, keep us rolling, man.
This is where it starts getting really tricky. That's where, when you said Brock Bowers versus is it too early for a tight end, the separation really is only one other tight end was Trey McBride that would even be remotely close to him. And so I'm fine with taking Bowers there, but the rest of them get all muddied. And here at this spot, if we're going off who the person took first, and that'd be Alvin Kamara, I would love to pair him with another running back that had just, despite the issues that they had early in the season, as far as who was going to be the lead back, some idiots said it was going to be Zach Moss. And I call those people stupid. And I said it from week one. Chase Brown is no more of a definition of a league winner type running back than for anybody that had Chase Brown that could input him. Really, would I like to have seen the whole season of Chase Brown? Sure. But what he was capable of doing really from weeks week 4, he had 22. And from that point on, he had one sub 10 point outing, and that was it. So, Talk about a beast. Weeks 14, 15, averaged over 20 points. He was the RB4, RB6. I love Chase Brown, and that offense is just disgusting. He is more than capable of carrying the load. And many talk, if Cincinnati drafts a running back this year, no, don't. Let Chase Brown carry the Bengals next year. I know this is for 2024, but I'll be saying the same thing for 2025 too.
If they do draft a running back, especially on day 2, I will be worried for Chase Brown at that point, because this is a really, really good running back class. And there are a lot of running backs that I think could have looked just as good, if not better, in the same role that Chase Brown had. Not to take anything away from Chase Brown, because he was incredible, especially once they just said, hey, the running back room is yours, here, take over. He was incredible. But if they take a running back with significant draft capital, I will be a little bit worried. But we don't have to worry about that in this scenario, because we're just redrafted for 2024. We don't give a shit about 2025. So for the 2024 redraft, Rhett, who would your next pick here be?
Drew, I'm going to try to win you a hardback right now and take Drake London. And here's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
Looking at Drake London right now, looking at his game log for the season, 8 games with 10 plus targets. You also had a 9 target game in there, an 8 target game in there, 2 8 target games. So you had 11 games, and he played all 17, 11 of 17 games where he had 8 or more targets. 158 for the season. We talked about the rapport he had with Michael Penix immediately, and the fact that should be a very interesting place to go heading into 2025. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about this season, and we've been waiting for the breakout. The breakout happened. 100 receptions, nearly 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, high target share. Drake London's a great pick at this point.
Yeah, he is absolutely elite target earner. He finally got to have his season. I didn't get my Kyle Pitts season, but I got my Drake London season, so I'll take it. I don't know how the Falcons keep accumulating all these players that I love so much, but it would just be great if they could stop doing that and they could spread it out a little bit. So I know I'm the late round quarterback guy. At least that's what I have claimed to be at starting, about like 30 minutes ago. But I'm gonna break the seal here, because the quarterback that I'm looking at, he averaged about 7-8 more points per game than any running back or receiver that I would take at this point. And so I think with the season he had, the MVP season that he had, I think that Lamar Jackson is very worthy to be taken at this point as the quarterback 1 off the board.
Yeah, that is you can't complain with that at all. I mean, he was just that good all year. And I know quarterbacks tend to have more value. They tend to score more points just by default because of how much they have the ball. But you're talking about a guy who throws for 41 touchdowns, over 4,000 yards, runs for another 900. He was 27 points better than Jamar Chase in terms of total fantasy points, and nearly 2 fantasy points per game better than Jamar Chase as well, too. So, I mean, it's hard to argue, man. The proof is in the pudding. Lamar Jackson he's
incredible, man.
He is, in my opinion, the best player in football, and I don't think it's not a hard argument for you to make right now at all.
No, he is.
I agree.
He won many people the leagues. He's far off the again, even at the onesie positions, it's hard to take early unless they're a difference maker, and he was that difference maker at that position for sure. So me, or is it you, Rhett?
It's you, Nate.
It's on you, Nate.
So this slide has gone too long. I know I said earlier touchdowns being a non-sticky stat, but when you have 12 of them attached to a dynamic offense and really no other threats, Terry McLaurin is just too good of a pick to pass, especially when you're pairing it with someone like a Derrick Henry, where if I had Derrick Henry and Terry McLaurin, I'd have 35 touchdowns between the two at the position. No, 31. I'm sorry. I apologize. 31. And I mean, what else can you ask for? That's just a solid one too. So Red, is it on you, right?
It is on me. And I'm
here's what we said earlier. Remember, you have your RB1. Are you comfortable taking this
here we
player
go.
to be your wide receiver one? You pair him with Bijan.
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't know what I'm doing right now, guys, because we are in a really, really weird spot in this draft where like there are a few guys we are like, oh, they were really good, but should they go this high? I'm not really sure. I'm kind of sick of taking wide receivers, so that's all I've done at this point. And all the good ones are really off the board. I'm not too sure I want to take JSN this high. I'm not too sure I want to take Bucky Irving this high. But you know what? I think it's James Cook is the next logical choice right here. I mean,
yeah, it is.
James Cook only 207 carries, but he had over 1,000 yards. We know touchdowns aren't sticky, but he has 16 of them for goodness sake. He becomes the goal line back in that offense, catches another 32 balls. Just extremely efficient all season long. It's the right call at this point.
Yeah,
it ain't fun, but it works.
Absolutely is. No, it's not it might not be the flashy pick, but look, I was worried for James Cook going into the year. That was another guy that I was wrong about. I really thought I thought with the struggles he had in the red zone, the fact that they brought in Ray Davis from Kentucky, I didn't expect him to hold on to that, to be that guy. And man, was he ever? I mean, so now I'm at a point where it's a little bit of a struggle for me here.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a quarterback that I want to take. There's a tight end that I want to take. But then there's also like it's just the I guess the one quarterback guy in me won't really let me do it. I just my instincts tell me, hey, you've got to pick a running back or you've got to pick a receiver. Like that's just them's the rules. I don't make them. I don't know who made them, but them's the rules. And so there's a couple running backs that stick out to me here. And it's probably not the right pick, to be honest with you, because the early season struggles were really, really bad. But he ended up finishing the season in PPR as the running back 11. And it was on the back of, I don't know, whether you traded for him or whatever the case may be, if you somehow were playing meaningful games in the fantasy playoffs, this dude absolutely smashed the last 2 weeks of the year. And if I know what I know now, I want that on my team. And so give me, I got to do it this way. Give me Jonathan Taylor, man. It was a rough year. Yeah. It was brutal, but I mean, in PPR leagues, he was the running back 11 in points per game. And then in week 16, he had almost 40 points. He had another 27 in week 17. Weather the storm, figure out how to make it there, and then ride that to your championship. So I'll take him at this point, even though I know for certain that there's smarter choices there, but my one quarterback brain won't allow me to take them.
I know that, and I'll help you by the tight end position you were wanting to take.
Yeah,
I'll support it. Just the exact opposite reason why I'm not taking George Kittle is that the 8 touchdowns supported a season that was really, really good for Kittle. A lot of that buoyed by injuries to Ayuk and Debo across and CMC. But Trey McBride, 136 targets, second only to Brock Bowers, 11, almost 12 fantasy points per game, just half a tenth of a point behind Brock Bowers, but 1 touchdown. And that game, was that 17 or 18?
Yeah, he got 1 in 17, then 1 in 18. So we only care about the 1 in 17.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought I had up here. Yeah, it is 1 through 17. So again, we know what happens, but just that's an
you get that many
piece.
Targets. Like, come on, man.
Exactly. There's nobody. You have to go down to really far down to see anybody that had a target number similar to Trey McBride that didn't have a touchdown. The next closest is Jake Ferguson with 82 targets, 56 targets behind. So Trey McBride there with Jamar Chase. Ooh, that's sexy.
All right, Rhett, bring us home.
All right. I'm going to bring us home, and I'm going to go a little bit hot takey right now because this guy missed a significant chunk of time at the beginning of the season. But when he got back, my man got rolling in a big way. We're talking about that guy who dropped up 41, who dropped over 40 points in week 14, had multiple 20-point games. His floor on most weeks was 17 points per game. Was the wide receiver 3 overall in fantasy points per game. let's close it with Puka Nacua, man. I mean, I know that he missed some time there, but you know what? When he was back and he was good to go, he was unbelievable. And he's just one of those guys where, just like with Kyron Williams, you're like, this guy can't keep doing this, right?
Right.
Like, no, he's going to keep doing it. He's establishing himself. A good comparison that I like that I think I'm going to start making, because he's not overly flashy, but he runs great routes and he has good size. He could very well end up becoming this generation's Keenan Allen, and that's something.
Yeah. I could sit here and talk all day about Puka Nacua and never get bored of it. On just some honorable mentions, some other guys I was considering whenever I picked Jonathan Taylor. Josh Allen, I think with the year he had, he deserves to be there. But again, one quarterback leagues. You took Trey McBride. James Conner is another guy that had a great year. Championship week wasn't ideal, but James Conner had a great year. Jalen Hurts, again, the quarterback thing, but I think he would have been a round 3 pick here. Joe Mixon, he really shit the bed in the fantasy playoffs, but he got you to the playoffs if you had him, though. JSN with his late year resurgence, T. Higgins, we talked about him already earlier, but he missed some time to start the year and in the middle of the year, so that would have been tough. Chuba Hubbard, is another one, and then Bucky Irving, the way he closed the year. I know that, Rhett, you brought him up a couple of times. Just some honorable mentions that we didn't get to in the first 2 rounds that I think are at least worth bringing up, that I was considering while making that James Cook picks or Jonathan Taylor pick. So
yeah, I think Devontae Adams is the only other name really, as far as
that's another one too.
Especially if I'm looking at weeks 15 through 17, fantasy championship MVP, or at least he was a top 6 receiver during that stretch, just like you mentioned some of the names earlier, with Jonathan Taylor and James Conner. Even then, still, towards the end, it was really, really strong. Bucky, 15. I mean, so many weird scenarios that honestly none of us would have ever looked at this this first 2 rounds and said, we can't be serious. We definitely must be screwed up.
Before Rhett takes us home, I feel bad because he made this comment like 35 minutes ago, and I did not throw it up here. I don't know if you're still here, Albert, but dude, you are one of one, man. You are one of one for always hanging out, always popping in, always saying something in the chat. We can always count on you, Albert. And that might have been just me taking that for granted, because I can always count on seeing your beautiful name down there saying hello to us, which is always appreciated. And just kind of warms the heart a little bit extra, considering this is our last show for a couple months. So appreciate you, Albert. Thank you for tuning in, man.
Yeah.
Well said.
Appreciate you, Albert. Appreciate everybody who locked in with us at some point this season, whether you were here weeks 1 through 19 of the show like Albert was, whether you just popped in for a little bit of time, whether you were a guest, whether you were one of our Fantasy and Frames cohorts, whoever it is who supported us this season. Like, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We have a blast doing this. I don't think any of us that are on the screen right now feel like we should be in a position where anyone should be listening to our advice whatsoever. But you know what? You guys tune in every week, and we appreciate you for it. We love you for it. And while we take this break, the plan is to build back stronger, be back better for 2025, and 100%. do the best damn podcast we can on the Fantasy and Frames Network. So, fellas, before we wrap for the 2024 season, Nate, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave the people with, man?
I don't. Go Chiefs.
Drew?
Go Rams. Just like
you, Drew.
Yeah, Rhett, you got any teams you want to shout out right now?
Well, I'm just gonna say this. Shout out Mickey Loomis for making my life miserable. Shout out this coaching search where apparently we're interviewing Cliff Kingsbury. Shout out the joke that this hire is going to be if it's anybody other than Aaron Glenn. So I mean,
that's my prediction for your Saints. I think Aaron Glenn just feels like a Saints hire to me.
For better or worse, because we don't know what a Saints hire is right now. But
I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But
I do have some final words before we head into 2025, and it's about the Saints. So let me just get on my soapbox for a second, because you guys have gotten
get
to
it off
brag
your chest, man,
all season long, and now I'm gonna go ahead and just rant one time before we get out of here. It's a simple solution. You cut Derek Carr, you're back into positive numbers for 2026. It's not a hard equation, but you know what? It ain't gonna happen. So you know what? Let's just
The Saints have got to commit to the suck, man. They need to do it.
Yeah, let's just enjoy the ride of being mediocre again in 2025 and then just running it back in perpetuity where we just restructure and dig ourselves more and more into a hole.
Kick the can down the road forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
So you know what? They're not very far from pushing me into Dan Campbell's arms. So he is also a former Saint. So that's all I gotta say, fellas. I love you guys. It's been a fun season. We are gonna keep on doing this. We're gonna keep on rocking it. And to our listeners, to anybody who follows us on X, Facebook, subscribers on YouTube, whoever it is, once again, heartfelt thank yous 100%. From all of us here on this screen. So for the last time of the 2024 season, I'm Rhett Manuel at Manuel Sports. That is Nate Markham at Nate Markham. And that is Drew Scott at Drew3MR. 4th and Frames. Toodles, baby.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential.